Good morning,
Good morning, Mr. Commissioner, members. We're ready to proceed, but perhaps my learned friend should take the floor first.
Thank you, Commissioners. As we informed you this morning, we were provided with documentation by the evidence leaders 15 minutes before we were due to start this morning. But we appreciate the indulgence that you've given us in order to study that documentation, and Dr. Matjila is in a position to proceed with that. The documentation consists of some timelines and other documentation to do with AO, and then some WhatsApp messages concerning the issue with the servers and Ms. Menya. So that's an issue that we've already dealt with, but so that's not to interrupt the flow. I think let's deal with the WhatsApp messages, and then we can proceed with where we were yesterday with the TGR agreement and the Sagamata INMS transactions.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, with regard to the WhatsApp messages, I received it this morning from Ms. Menye, and I handed it to Dr. Matjila at about 20 to 9 this morning. It only deals with a notification she has given to the CFO and the head of risk regarding the server problem. It is before the Commission. Dr. Matjila, can I just ask you perhaps on those WhatsApp messages that I've given you, do you accept it?
It's just reminding me, slander oath. Dr. Matjila, you slander oath.
Yes, Commissioner.
It would seem to me, and I'd just like your comment, that the people who gave you information about this gave you the incorrect information.
Commissioner, as far as I know, the information that I have presented is my statement regarding servers is the correct one. I was not informed about server being fixed for the whole night. So even the WhatsApp here, I'm seeing them for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. That deals with the WhatsApp messages. Then my colleague can then continue with Sagamatha.
Am I correct that we're at paragraph 407? But I've ringed.
Mr. Commissioner, there was an arrangement yesterday that we would return to their agreement, that Dr. Matjila wanted an opportunity to be given an opportunity to look at.
That's correct, Mr. Commissioner.
That's the sale of shares and claims agreement.
Indeed.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah, I've ringed it, I see. DD60 was the document.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. Actually, it is DD60.1, DD60 and 60.1. Mr. Commissioner, before I proceed on the agreement, may I just ask to be given an opportunity to deal with the documents that I gave to Dr. Matjila this morning and the emails that he forwarded to Dr. Survé.
Emails that you talked about yesterday.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, you want to ask further questions relating to those.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
All right.
Dr. Matjila, yesterday I asked you questions on the emails that you forwarded to Dr. Survé. Is it correct that I gave you those emails last week, you and your counsel?
Commissioner, I am not sure which emails are you talking about. What is the content? Because you've given us so many things.
The emails
lost track in terms of
the emails dealing with the allegations against you by James Nogu and
those were
Lichola
received.
Lichola.
Yes, those were received last week, I think.
Yes, and then this morning I gave you copies of Dr. Survé's statement and Mr. Lebohang's Molebati's statement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
May I ask you to go to paragraph 415 of your statement?
415.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Commissioner, Dr. Matjila hasn't given his evidence on these paragraphs. Perhaps if he's going to be asked questions about them, he should first give his evidence.
Mr. Commissioner, I'm not asking questions on the IO transactions. I'm just trying to establish that Dr. Matjila is not seeing Mr. Lebohang Molebati's statement for the first time today.
Why can't that wait until we get there?
Because when we deal with Sagamath, I'm going to ask him questions based on Mr. Molebati's statement. Okay,
All right, let's hear. I don't know what you want to establish, but all right, let's
may
hear
I,
what
may I just ask this question without necessarily having to refer to the paragraphs? Dr. Matjila, did you read Mr. Lebohang Molebati's statement?
Yes, I've read it, but the commissioners must understand that there have been many other statements that I had to go through. So I wouldn't say I know the content 100%. We need to keep referring to those paragraphs that are important from time to time.
When you read the statement, did you read the entire statement?
Yes.
And then in your statement, you referred to Mr. Tatenda Makuti, who is in the legal division. Did you read his statement or did you watch when he was testifying before this commission?
I read his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Now, the emails. From the documents that I have read, it seems that the practice at the PIC, when the media made inquiries, the practice was for them to approach the corporate affairs divisions, which handles communications within the PIC. Am I correct?
That's a process, yes, but it's not the process. It can be. In fact, the board has given me authority to be the spokesperson of the organization.
Okay, so there was no need for you to refer Dr. Survé.
There was no need.
Thank you. And then there is an email which formed part of the emails that I gave to you last week. And in that email, it is apparent from that email that you requested the EcoBank officials to do research for you on e-commerce in Africa. Is that correct?
They were not doing research for me. They were sharing research that they have on e-commerce with us.
And then you forwarded that information to Dr. Survé on the same day you received it?
Yes, because he requested if the PIC has done any work on e-commerce in Africa, and I said to him, well, we don't have, but perhaps our partners, which is EcoBank, might have, because they are invested in a lot of countries and they are very much into technology. They will be able to assist in that regard, and indeed they were able to provide something in that regard, which I then passed on to Dr. Survé as requested.
And when you contacted EcoBank, did you do that in your capacity as CEO of the PIC?
Yes, I mean, I've used, if my memory serves me well, this email is from the PIC, I think.
Okay. Don't you think that that might be interpreted as you using your position as CEO of the PIC to benefit a third party?
I don't know the nature of the benefit. If it's knowledge, benefiting knowledge, I mean, we do share knowledge across. There are people who share knowledge with us, expertise, research, and all that gets exchanged in the ecosystem, so I don't see any problem with knowledge sharing.
Mr. Commissioner, I will now move to the agreement. Dr. Matjila, I handed you a copy, 2 pages, which contain the transcribed evidence of Mr. Tatenda Makuti. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Then, if you look at page 127 of that document, from line 20, Mr. Makuti said the following: the acting CEO, Matsepo, called various members, myself, my manager, Sasa, I think, and guys from the unlisted side, because she wanted also to understand the history of the agreement. I think it was also new to her. So I rather think she wanted to know if the agreement was still valid and all those kind of things. So I was then tasked by my manager just to provide a summary of the issues and whether we can cancel the agreement. May I ask you to move to the next page? And then I asked him a question. If I may ask you once again, are you aware that PIC internal processes were complied with before the agreement was signed or not? And the following was his answer: definitely, I'm not really sure. That's something that we were also trying to figure out when we contacted TGR attorneys, just to check if, especially on the part of legal, whether we followed our process before signing of the agreement. That Mr. Makuti seems to be saying in those passages that I have read that no one within the PIC knew about the agreement. Do you have any comment on that?
I don't understand what Mr. Makuti says. This agreement captures discussions that have been had from September 2017 around the possible restructuring of INMSA and possible exit of the PIC. And part of the process, as we have outlined, Commissioner, was that INMSA may be absorbed into the new entity. And the process of doing that required all shareholders to agree to subordinating their loans and claims or converting their loans and claims into equity. And that had also the effect of fixing the balance sheet of independent news media, which was already in distress. So in preparation for that, all shareholders were requested to subordinate their claims or convert them into equity. And so this document here captures exactly that we support, as PIC and other shareholders would have signed the same thing as well, that says that we support conversion of our loans and claims into equity of a company that's going to be listed earlier on, subject to certain conditions that are highlighted here, some of which were not met. And most importantly, I need to highlight that this document was signed on the 13th. The meeting, as we discussed yesterday, of IC was held on the 6th of December. And the reason why this was signed on the 13th, the discussions have happened. I was not in that meeting on the 6th of December that decided on not of separating the listing from the settlement of loans and claims by the PIC against NMSA. But the gist of it was that this memo or this contract here was signed in order to fix the balance sheet of NMSA in preparation for the listing, and this was a request for all shareholders to do. That's the basis.
Just for the record, the document that is referred to is the document that we marked yesterday, DD 60.1.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
I think so, Commissioner.
Yes.
The TGR.
Yeah, can I just say that insofar as the signing of the document, it appears that you signed, if that's your signature, on the last page.
Yes.
You signed on the 13th of December, but there's another signature on the 14th.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So this was to fix the balance sheet of independent news media ahead of the listing of Sagamata, and it has conditions that should be fulfilled, including the listing of Sagamata itself. And so, in January, then Mr. Miller then explained to me that the IC has decided not to support full conversion, but only the conversion part of equity, and separate the listing from the actual settlement of all claims, loans and claims due to the PIC. And that was captured in the letter that was written by Mr. Miller to independent news media, therefore nullifying this agreement, in other words.
May I ask you this question? Do you know if there was a resolution that said that the PIC could enter into an agreement with Sagamata in terms of which IMSA and SIM's debt to the PIC could be swapped for shares in Sagamata?
There was no resolution, but there was an agreement within the PIC that it's something that can be done. Because if you look at the value of shares that are going to be converted, it's at a reasonable premium versus our entry price. That was the attraction. It's around 883.3 million versus 1.5 billion potential exit if that listing happens. So I was happy as the CEO to agree to such a conversion taking place, if it can take place.
Do you know when that agreement was reached and by whom?
This agreement has been negotiated among all the other shareholders, as I said, and the PIC was then requested to support.
And follow up on that question, do you know?
Sorry, was the PIC part of the negotiations?
Yes, yes,
get to
Commissioner.
that-
Yeah,
to
this
get
has
to
been
that
a to and
agreement.
fro negotiation between the different parties that culminated into this agreement.
Do you know who represented the PIC in the negotiations?
This would have been the transaction team, because the essence of it was simply a conversion. There was nothing, if you read the contract, it's nothing extraordinary. It's just about, subordinating the claims of the PIC in order to fix the balance sheet of independent news media. And this is something that we do most of the time. There's been several such transactions where we subordinate.
Mr. Commissioner, may I just place it on record that we will consult with the transaction team regarding the alleged agreement?
Do you mind if we ask some questions in relation to this, or are you moving to some other topic?
Still have questions on the agreement, Mr. Commissioner.
All right, carry on.
Dr. Matjila, may I ask you to go to page 3 of that agreement? And may I specifically refer you to clause 2.4.16. That's offer price. It reads as follows. Offer price means 39.62 rand per ordinary share of the purchaser. Do you know if any due diligence was done before the offer price was?
Let me explain here. This is an agreement that simply says we will do this kind of thing into the future. There's not even a PLS at that point. The listing is still going to happen. So there's a lot of conditions that need to be fulfilled for this to take effect. It's just an idea that we should subordinate, and this is the basis of which a subordination will be made as and when this eventually happens.
And then may I ask you to go to, I think it's clause 5. It deals with purchase price and payment. Clause 5.1 deals with the purchase price, which is about 1.5 billion rand, and it sets out how it is made up. And then clause 5.2 reads as follows. On the effective date, the purchase price shall be discharged by the purchaser allotting and issuing to the seller the purchaser shares, credited as fully paid up at a price equal to the offer price. I understand that clause to mean that no cash payment would be made. Do you agree?
That's an agreement. Commissioner, we said that this is swapping of shares into a listed entity. I think we've made that clear before.
And at its meeting of the 6th of November 2017, the PEPS-FIB took a contrary resolution. Do you agree? Or the resolution that it took is contrary to what is stated in clause 5.2. Do you agree?
Commissioner, what's important here is they say the PEPS committee says any settlement must be separated from the listing. So in other words, the PEPS says we want cash for our shares or any loans and claims. That's what it means.
Mr. Commissioner, I have no further questions.
Dr. Matjila, just on this, we're going to come to Sagarmatha itself, and we will deal with a lot of the things there, but it is not as simple in terms of the conditions precedent as was determined on the meeting of the 6th of December. You signed on the 13th of December, and you weren't in that FIPS meeting. Is it not correct process in the PIC that before you went into an agreement, you would see what the decisions were in a FIPS meeting, whether there was actually approval, agreement? Did you not look at the decision of that 6th of December meeting?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I never had a chance to do that, and most of my colleagues had left already, who were in the meeting, to appraise me on what the IC has decided on.
But wouldn't that be a precondition of moving onwards, that you know what the decision of an investment committee is?
It would be, but I didn't see any harm in signing this because it had enough safeguards for the PIC, including the listing. So I was comfortable signing without the knowledge of what the IC has decided.
We're going to come to that, yeah. But I mean, so you were comfortable signing again on something that I would have thought, process would require, especially once you saw what even subsequently, even if you didn't check it before you took the decision, and you saw the preconditions, and the preconditions as contained in the resolution and in Mervyn Miller's letter, which was obviously in January, but the preconditions in this document that we've been referring to, DD 60A, the preconditions are very different. So were the preconditions that were, did it make you, when you found out subsequently what the preconditions were, did you review your agreement with, that you had agreed to?
I think Commissioner, the issue here is that this fell away because any decision of the next committee will nullify any agreement that is entered into by somebody below that.
But is there any formal resolution that was done? Because the Sagamartha deal continues right up until the listing proposal.
It continues.
So it didn't fall away?
Yeah, I think it continues, but it's separated as per the committee's approval. It's separate from the loans and claims.
Okay, we'll come back to the Sagamartha. Let's look at it in context. So just to be clear around this, you signed the agreement knowing there was a meeting that you were not at, that there would have been a decision, but you did not, as you say, have the time to look at that decision and have it influence what you were signing.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
thank
correct.
you.
Mr. Commissioner, may I just refer the Commission to paragraph 66 of Mr. Lebogang Molebatsi's statement.
The paragraph 66 of Molebatsi's statement.
Yes.
Okay, so
He says,
can you read it into the record?
yes, it reads as follows. Based on minutes from the PMC meeting held on 6th April 2018, the sale agreement was nullified. I was not part of the discussions that resulted in this nullification. The sale agreement was signed by Dr. Den, and I therefore assume that he would have been the one who negotiated this. I just wanted to point out that, according to Mr. Molebatsi, the sale agreement was nullified on the 6th of April 2018, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And that's the agreement 60.1.
Excuse me, Mr. Commissioner.
Is the agreement that Mr. Molebatsi refers to the TGR agreement, the sale of shares and claims agreement? Or is it
Yes,
something else?
yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah, all right.
If I may refer the Commission to paragraph 60 of the statement, it says the following.
Whose statement?
Mr. Molebatsi. He says the following. However, as per the request from Fidelis to make a submission to a PMC, Victor proceeded to put the submission for PMC 1. In our submission, we had already highlighted that our fair value was much lower at 7 rand 6 cents compared to Sagamartha's IPO asking price of 39 rand 62 cents. In addition, we outlined that part of the capital raised from the IPO would be used by Sagamartha to buy PIC shares in and loan claims against independent media and Sekunjalo independent media. This information was disclosed in the draft PLS, where it referenced a sale agreement entered into on or about 1 December 2017. I believe that there was a mistake. I think the intention was to refer to the agreement that was signed on the 13th of December 2017. Unless there is another agreement that Dr. Matjila signed on the 1st of December 2017.
Well, is there another agreement that you signed on that date, Dr. Matjila?
No, Commissioner, let me quickly clarify the issues here. I think there's a misunderstanding. The price of 7.06 rand is being dealt with later on by the listed investors as per the recommendation of the FIP that this should then be taken over to IC to test appetite. And that would have been later on after January, I think, as part of the process of investing or analyzing Sagamata.
Mr. Commissioner.
So this price of 7.06 rand, it's for later, not at the time when this document is signed. There's a proposal of 39 rands, but that will be subject to certain internal processes, including price verification. Once the PLS is out, which is what happened, the team then started analyzing and came to a different value from what the PLS was prescribing.
Mr. Commissioner, there was a question from you whether the paragraph that I had read, Mr. Molebatsi, in the paragraph that I had read, Mr. Molebatsi was referring to Annexure DD 60.1. I just wanted to confirm that that was the agreement that he was referring to. I wasn't focusing on the share price.
Are you done? No further questions?
Yes, Mr.
You didn't tell us. Right, any further?
I thought I said it earlier, Mr. Commissioner, that I had no further questions.
No questions. All right. None from our side, so I think we can continue.
Just a couple, Mr. Commissioner. Dr. Matjila, so we've now established that Mr. Molebatsi confirms your evidence that this sale of shares as per what I can call the TGR agreement, Annexure DD 60.1, was quotes unquotes nullified. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But if I can just take you to that agreement nonetheless, and if we just look at the conditions precedent in paragraph 3.1, it says that this agreement by which the parties shall be bound with effect from their signature date is subject to the following conditions precedent, which must be fulfilled on or before the effective date. Okay? And if we have a look at what effective date means at paragraph 2.4.7, it means either the date on which the SENS announcement is to be released. What's a SENS announcement?
This is the Stock Exchange News Services.
As notified by the purchaser to the seller in writing, or if no such SENS announcement is to be released the second business day following the date on which the purchaser notifies the seller in writing that the listing will proceed. So that's the date by which these conditions precedent must be fulfilled. One of the conditions precedent in paragraph 3.1.1 is the SIM sale agreement being entered into and becoming unconditional in accordance with its terms. Now that SIM sale agreement is also defined in the sale agreement in paragraph 2.4.37, which means the agreement to be entered into between SIM Consortium 1, SIM Consortium 2, SIM Consortium 3 and the purchaser, in terms of which SIM Consortium 1, SIM Consortium 2, SIM Consortium 3 sell and the purchaser agrees an aggregate of 92% of the issued ordinary shares in SIM. As a fact, that SIM sale agreement never came into existence.
As far as I know, we haven't seen such an agreement.
And did this SENS announcement occur or not?
The SENS announcement I'll have to check, but it would have happened once the Sagamata was about to list. There would have been a sense announcement. We'll have to find.
But Sagamata didn't list,
Sagamata didn't list eventually.
and there was no SIM sale agreement as defined in this contract either.
We haven't seen that either.
So the condition precedent there wasn't fulfilled.
As far as I can remember.
And you've stated that the reason that you concluded this contract is because you were unaware of the decision taken at the FIPS, is that correct?
That's correct.
But once you were aware of that decision at the FIPS, in fact, you signed a new contract which is attached as DD 60.
Yes, which, if I recall, we were looking for the signed copy.
Yes.
Yes.
That's an unsigned copy that you've provided us, but you recall that you signed a copy.
Yes, yes.
And that new contract that you signed then gives effect to the FIPS decision to separate the exit from INMSA from the entry into Sagamata.
That's correct, Commissioner.
I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, may I just ask one question on the issue of whether Dr. Matjila was aware of the FIPS resolution? Dr. Matjila, Ms. Bongadi Matebula testified before this commission that she emailed you the PEPS-FIP resolution and that you would have been aware thereof. Do you have any comment on that?
I don't know when and what time. I haven't seen that. It may have been sent, but I may not have seen it.
Is it fair to say or to interpret your response as you don't recall?
Yeah, I don't recall seeing such a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Sorry, can I just ask in relation to DD 60 then, on the conditions precedent, and the point you've made about meeting the conditions precedent of the FIP agreement. Do you reflect that at all in this agreement? Because I can't see a definition in relation to it.
Commissioner, we are lost.
Yeah, I'm just saying that you've just confirmed that your DD 60 met the FIP preconditions, the conditions precedent.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to see where the definition is of separation, that this does not, in this document, where the separation is that you cannot have, that you would be getting funding not linked to the Sagamata listing. Does that get reflected at all in this agreement?
Yeah, I think this is the payment schedule already, dealing with how payment is going to be done. So the two are now separated. The settlement is separate from the listing, and this captures
just the settlement.
Just a settlement, cash settlement, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
If we can then move on to Sagamata itself, which is paragraph 408. Dr. Matjila.
Paragraph 408, Commissioner. I was invited by Dr. Iqbal Survé to attend a meeting with Sagamata's senior management in Cape Town the 14th of November after the PIC meeting with Standing Committee of Finance on the new bill, to discuss the new PIC bill. Mr. Paula Namontaine, who was intended to become CEO of the listing, gave a full presentation on Sagamata and the plan to list. Mr. Fidelis Madavo accompanied me to this meeting. I asked them to provide Mr. Madavo with the transaction material and a pre-listing statement once finalized. Mr. Madabo led the process from then on. Mr. Madabo passes the information to the relevant team for processing. The transaction team on the 29th of January 2018 reported to PEP's FIP meeting that Sagamata was preparing to list in 2 months. As previously mentioned, Sagamata will be the exit strategy for the PIC investment in INMSA. The committee formally clarified that the listed team can proceed with the due diligence and the IC should be approached for comfort. According to the Sagamata pre-listing statement, a copy of which is attached and marked as DD 61, the listing price of Sagamata was set at 39.62 per share. The listed investment team did all the analysis and arrived at an valuation of 7.06 per share. The IC was approached to test their appetite as per FIP requirement. The IC did not support the deal but referred it back to management to decide that this was within the delegated authority of PMC listed. There were various proposals from Sekunjalo Investment Holding led by Dr. Iqbal Survé, which included an issuing of a R1 strike call options to the PIC to bring down the average entry share price to a figure closer to 7.06 per share valuation of the PIC. This was considered by the PIC but would not be possible to implement as all other potential subscribers would have to be offered the same. This will require this change to be reflected in the pre-listing statement of Sagamata. The PIC withdrew its support for the listing because the difference in the share prices were too high. The listing was subsequently withdrawn by the JC, citing non-compliance with Companies Act. Therefore, the conversion of independent news media into Sagamata fell through. The IC met on the 16th of October to consider a new proposal from SIM. At that point, 50% of the outstanding balance of 677 million was due on the 16th of August 2018, and the rest was due on the 16th of August 2020. Furthermore, Sekunjalo and INMSA were obliged to settle an amount of 214,747 rands due to Intercom Investment Holdings. SIM and IMSA were in default. The PIC had issued a default notice to SIM and IMSA to remedy the breach within 20 days of receipt of notice as per relevant legal contracts. Failure to remedy would result in the PIC exercising its rights as per legal contracts. SIM had approached to pay PIC 330 million, which is about 37% of capital owing within 5 years, payable as follows: 30 rands within 7 days after agreements are signed, 40 million within 90 days, 30 million within 120 days of the signature of the agreements. 57.5 million paid annually.
Sorry, that first figure is 330 million, isn't it?
330 million, Commissioner. So the 57.5 million paid annually for 4 years, and the balance will be payable based on the performance of the company. The IC was concerned that even if the offer is accepted, SIM will still be in default in the near future. The IC approved the proposal and stressed that there should not be any more tolerance for default. I understand that this decision was reversed after I've left the PIC. The PIC currently has 1.275 billion investment in Independent Media Group. However, it did not invest in Sagamata Technology Limited, which would have become the new holding vehicle for independent news media and its ambitious electronic and digital expansion plans.
Just a clarification here. The 1.275 versus the 1.3, like if you look at page 143, I just wanted to see how those numbers add up. If you look at the valuation in that column, the valuation column, it says the PIC is owed 1.3 billion. You know, when you add the interest and the other things. Is this a PIC figure or what?
Commissioner, these figures must be the same. There must be a typo. It must be a typo.
Yes.
We expect them to be the same.
Yes. So does it mean then that the PIC is owed 1.3 billion rands?
Yes, 1.3
at the,
billion.
when you sort of gross up the interest and other things, yeah?
Yeah.
And then the 1.275 then is not a correct figure? Or do we gross it to 1.3 billion? Maybe it's rounded up to 1.3.
I think we'll have to check why it's different.
1.275.
Although it's not material, but
yeah.
But
it's around
I expect them to
1.3.
be the same. I think that this must have been a typo.
It should be the same figures, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. You can continue. It's fine.
Okay.
I think
Thank
we
you.
must just establish.
Thank you, Commissioner. Through the PIC involvement with Sagamata, IO Technologies and Independence Media Group, it was widely supported that these dealings came about as a result of a close personal relationship or friendship that existed between me and Dr. Iqbal Survé. I would, at this opportunity, like to set the record straight. Yes, there was a continuous engagement with Dr. Survé, and the reason for this was not because of friendship per se, but because I and my colleagues were worried that the PIC was being increasingly exposed to high risk, and I needed to be closely involved with the major players so as to enable to be able to continually assess the situation. There was a talk of restructuring the organizations involved, and I needed to be at the forefront so as to influence decisions which would be in the best interest of the PIC. And I strongly believe that not having this continuous engagement would have been reckless.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, Mr. Monahed.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. And if I may refer the Commissioner again before I start my questioning to paragraph 65 of Mr. Lebogang Molebatsi's statement. He also makes it clear in that paragraph that he was referring to the agreement signed by Dr. Matjila on the 13th of December 2017. He says in the third sentence of that paragraph, the final pre-listing statement did not make reference to the previously mentioned sale agreement wherein Sagamata would buy PIC shares in and loan claims against independent media and Sekunjalo independent media. Dr. Matjila, may I refer you to paragraph 67, 68, and 69 of Mr. Molebatsi's statement. He says at paragraph 67, on the 4th of April 2018, we submitted a request for IC to approve participation in the Sagamata IPO, not at the asking price of 39.62 cents, but at the PIC's estimated intrinsic value of 7.06 cents. Paragraph 68, on the 6th April 2018, a special PMC was held and resolved to approve the transaction, but at the intrinsic value per the report we submitted to IC and PMC, that is 7.06 cents. IC subsequently held a telecom on the matter and resolved that PMC had the delegation of authority to deal with the transaction. Now, paragraph 69. Based on an email received from Dr. Den on 10 April 2018, it became clear that Sekunjalo had continued negotiations on the transaction with Dr. Den. In this email, Dr. Den proposed that we submit a new PMC document. The salient features of the deal that was reached was 69.1. PIC would subscribe as Sagamatha's original requested listing price of 39 Rand 90, I think he made a mistake, it should be 39 Rand 62 cents, for 3 billion Rand worth of shares. 69.2, in addition, Sagamatha would issue PIC a call option of 1 Rand on enough number of shares so as to give us an average price of 8 Rand 50 cents per share. 69.3, in effect, the PIC would be receiving exposure to Sagamatha at a lower price, that is 8 Rand 50 cents, than the IPO price on the same day that other subscribers would be paying the full price. But I want to focus specifically on the first sentence of paragraph 69, where Mr. Molebati said, based on an email received from Dr. Den on 10 April 2018, it became clear that Sekunjalo had continued negotiations on the transactions with Dr. Den. It appears as if Mr. Molebati and the team were not aware that you were dealing directly with the Sekunjalo officials. Do you have any comment on that?
I don't understand this, Commissioner, because we've interacted with the team a lot on various proposals that were coming from Sekunjalo, including all forms of protections that they were putting forward. This is just one of the proposals that they put forward to the PIC, which I communicated directly to the team that they consider it if it's doable. So it's not a secret that there was a lot of proposals that were coming from Sagamatha.
But according to the evidence before this commission, they had made a final decision to recommend that the PIC should subscribe at 7 Rand 6 cents per share, and they were not willing to change their mind on that.
I don't agree with that. I don't know what he means by not willing, because we have been negotiating and very different scenarios have been put on the table, as I explained earlier.
Can I just get this, or get clarity on this? Are you saying that whilst the transaction team was busy with negotiations, you were also on the side having dealings with the Sagamatha people?
There has been a lot of interaction on different scenarios that they were proposing, which I had passed on to the team, Commissioner. It was not a bilateral. I've always passed on information to the team because they are the ones that are processing information. I can't take a decision without them saying yes or no.
When you met with or interacted with Dr. Survé, coming back to a previous question, did you meet him on your own? Did members of the team, did you ever meet him on your own? Or did you always take a member of the team with you?
I think, Commissioner, in the case of Sagamatha, I haven't met him alone.
You never met him alone?
No. The first meeting, as I explained here, happened in Cape Town somewhere, in the presence of Mr. Madavo, and then I passed on information to them. Then from there, there were mainly email correspondence on different scenarios that we could consider.
And all those emails were forwarded to the team?
Yes, yes, Commissioner.
Okay. Can I just ask you, if you don't mind, the question that Mr. Molebati is saying that we are on his statement. He states very clearly in the testimony before the Commission that the CEO wanted the Sagamatha deal to go to the PMC and go through, irrespective of the facts. It was an instruction that the transaction be presented to the PMC. Furthermore, the continued negotiations by Dr. Matjila with Sekunjalo directly put his team in harm's way.
Commissioner, I don't know where Mr. Molebati is coming from on this, because we've always debated issues, we've discussed matters, and we've reached consensus. That, I mean, The impression that is created here that I forced the deal is not true. I don't agree with this.
What were you passing on to the team? What actually was it that you were passing on to the team?
It's mainly the counter proposals that I was receiving from the Sagamata team, led by Dr. Survé. For example, this R1 proposal, R1 call option proposal, they sent it to me, then I passed on to the team to see if it's something that we can look at. And it became clear from the team that it can't be done because then the PL changed, because you can't create a special dispensation for one investor in a listing, in an IPO. All investors must work from the same information and be entitled to the same privileges in terms of the PLS. Otherwise, you have to change the PLS and issue a new one with new conditions and privileges, to put that way.
Would that be the reason why you would not agree to it, that it would have been a question of issuing a new PLS? You still hadn't issued, as far as I'm aware, the final listing statement had not been concluded at that point. Was that the only reason?
Sorry, I don't understand the question, Commissioner.
The question is, you've said that this could not go, this deal of R1 on the side, which we agreed before here, it was raised with the JSE as a concern of a differentiated approach between the PIC and what it would pay, because I think if I remember, it would be something that on average, and 50 or so, that was the only reason why you need to go with this was because you would have to rework the PLS? Or was it actually flawed?
I think the most important thing here is that the price, if R1 call option is accepted and is legitimate, and it gives us a price that is closer to intrinsic value, there wouldn't be a problem.
Mr. Molabatsi indicated his reservations, saying that he was not convinced that Sagamata would have the balance sheet, and that he communicated that to you. Do you recall that?
I think he did about the balance sheet. Yeah, we did consider that. It's probably one of the reasons that it was difficult to accept this proposal as well. Because you needed a combination of ability to honor the call option when it's exercised, and that requires the right balance sheet to do that.
So in essence, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that this deal, irrespective of the JSE then cancelling the IPO, you were not going ahead with the Sagamata deal?
Yes, that's the decision of the committee. We had
And have you got
decided
a
that the
record of
press-
that decision?
Sorry.
Have you got a record of that decision?
Yes, so I think it would have been in the PMC that discussed.
Useful if we could
Yeah.
see that, as well as then your communication, Dr. Survé, about not proceeding and the reasons for that, because one would assume that you'd have gone back to him to say you are not proceeding and
Yeah.
these are the reasons why IPO.
Okay.
Can I be of assistance to the Commission and refer the Commission to the extract from the minutes of the PMC listed investments meeting held on 23rd May 2018, which is part of Annexure DD 58 to our annexures, and in connection with Sagamata Technologies Limited, it says the committee noted that the investment committee declined to approve the recommended transaction wherein the PIC would participate in the Sagamata listing at or below the PIC's base case estimate of Sagamata's intrinsic value of R7.06. Furthermore, the listing was withdrawn by the JSE. This matter should be closed.
what you've got as DD 58.2. 58.3.
I think it's part,
58.3?
but it
It's
is,
the 8th of May.
yes.
That's
It's
the IO technology.
No, the 23rd of May, 2018. It's part of part 2, and I think it's the last document in part 2.
Yeah, DD 58 has a lot of subsections.
That's right. So I think it's got 3, and this is the last document in part 2.
Is it the
Yeah,
the
I've got it,
extract
thank
of
you.
the 8th of May?
23rd of May, Mr. Commissioner. It's the last document in part 2.
The 10th of April. '23rd of May. It's this half page here. This one. Just before DD 58.3. Thanks, I've got it. And we assume that there would be correspondence to Dr. Survé confirming that.
I would assume that there should be.
Would that have come after this decision?
I think it would have been immediately after the decision.
And the IPO was expected to happen when?
I think it was about the same day or so, the day before. We'll have to check that, Commissioner. Sagamata.
The original, again, going back to Mr. Molabatsi, I think he says the transaction was running parallel to that of IO with an IPO date at the end of the last week in January 2018, or the first week of February 2018.
According to his statement, it says on the 12th of April, the JC cancelled the IPO. And so the PIC would have...
The JC cancelled on the 12th of April.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the PIC would have taken that decision either on the same day or before that. I think they were very close, those decisions.
Okay, thank you.
We can find it out. You don't have the PLS.
You're right, yes, we do have that. Look at it now.
Sagamata PLS.
Sorry, Commissioners, just in respect of Commissioner Marcus's last question, the Sagamata PLS is Annexure 61, page 553. And the just looking for the listing date. No.
It's not there, right?
It's just an extract from the pre-listing statement of Sagamata, but I can't see a listing date anywhere on it.
Mr. Commissioner, my recollection is that the listing date was 13 April 2018.
Sorry, the second last paragraph on the first page on 553 says the JSE has granted Sagamata Technologies approval for listing of up to so many shares in the media sector, subsector broadcasting and entertainment on the main board of the JSE with effect from the commencement of trade on Friday 6 April 2018 under the abbreviated name Sagamath.
Just a question from me. You mentioned that, you know, there were some options that were looked at to sell the INMS group. What options were they? What options were being looked at in terms of dealing with this group, the independent group?
I think the main one was through the listing of Sagamata.
Sagamata.
Yeah, and simply transferring the assets into, converting the assets, all shareholders converting their loans and claims into equity and receiving shares in Sagamata in lieu of that.
Yeah. And since Sekunjalo had, you know, made some offer, didn't the PIC think this deal didn't come through, you know, the Sagamata deal? Didn't the PIC maybe think of buying out Sekunjalo in the group? Or even selling the whole group to another grouping like Lebashe has done in buying Diso Blackstar?
I think in my statement I do talk about the breach notice as well as the legal contracts now kicking in terms of the remedies that the PIC has at its disposal. So that would have been considered by the PIC as a way forward at that point.
Because it's dragging on and, you know, the value keeps going down, you know, so I thought, you know, maybe something should be done sooner than later to salvage some value for the PIC.
I'm sure the Commission can advise them.
No. We're just trying to talk here, yeah. Because there are people who are, there is staff at that group, I'm sure they are feeling very insecure, you know, but this issue has been dragging on for a while.
I think the PIC is in a strong position to then deal with the matter in terms of the legal contracts that are in place.
So I was going to say, I'm not surprised by your answer because you are no longer with the PIC.
Yeah.
I was trying to say that in a nice way.
We forget sometimes, yeah. We actually forget, you know. Okay, all right, yeah. But you are saying that the PIC has begun to deal with this issue.
When I left, I mean, I did sign the default letter, and the legal team was beginning to see what remedies they have, you know, in curing this.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
I want to refer back to some of the other witness statements, and perhaps just to go back to Ms. Abrams' statement that she says that given that the investment was tabled at the PMC listed investment for approval in April, the team recommended investment in the IPO, but at a proposed share price much lower than the asking price in the IPO pre-listing statement. In so doing, this would, she thought, make the offer unattractive. Some members expressed concern as to whether Sagamata would use some of the IPO proceeds for expunging some of the obligations to the PIC in the independent media investment. Do you remember that conversation? And were you aware, or how did you see the pricing that Ms. Abrams refers to?
The R7.06?
R7.06. They said this because they were, the testimony given was that this had to go forward, and their valuation was R7.06, and their understanding was that at that value, the PMC would see it that they did not want to support that, although the team had been told they must support it. That was basically the evidence that we...
Yeah, Commissioner, I agree that that price was on the table, and that was the price that was recommended by the team, that we can only transact at R7.06 or better. And if we can't find each other in terms of that price with the Sagamata, then there's no transaction. That was clear. I don't think the price of R7.06 came from risk. It came from the transaction team. Yes. Risk was just saying the price should be R7.06 and nothing else.
If we go to Mr. Varghesi's statement, again on Sagamata, in essence, he raises a concern or a question that Sagamata and AO were co-subsidiaries of an ultimately effective controlling shareholder, the Survé family, and that this was a parallel process between the IO listing and the Sagamata listing was happening at the same time, or more or less the same time, with the draft prospectus of 12th of January being that the PIC received a draft indicating the sale of unlisted investments held by the PIC in independent media swapping to Sagamata, and that was the precondition that should be removed, that was to be separated out. Correct. He then goes on to say that Mr. Siani advised Sagamata Chief Executive Mr. Hove that the valuations were too rich and the listing price should be reduced. And the value of 706 was done by Mr. Siani, reviewed by Mr. Varghesi, Mr. Malabatsi, and Madavo. But the PIC resolved to subscribe if the price was 706 below, entered into a put option and not pay a dividend. The IC pushed back the decision to management to deal with the matter which was in their DOA and instructed that no deals more than 1 billion rand in future could be scheduled by a telecom because it was a round robin. This question of pushing back and bringing it back into management decision, Mr. Varghesi then states that you then look at the question of the R8.50, and the team met with Mr. Matjila to persuade him that the price was too high. He reluctantly agreed and promised to inform Sekunjalo. Did that occur? You informed Sekunjalo that the price was not acceptable to you?
I think that's what we did.
That was from the team's view to you?
Yeah, I think that's what we did, Commissioner.
Okay. And then Mr. Makuti, as part of your legal team, was that he was provided with a draft PLS of Sagamata to formulate a legal response. He raised concerns about relying on a draft PLS to do this. It would be contrary to the JSE listing requirements, which provides that a PLS must be formally approved by the JSE before publication. And he raised issues including conflict of interest and did not recommend the transaction. Requested more information before being able to provide a proper recommendation as to whether to support the transaction or not. He was then told by his executive head, I was instructed to amend my legal report for IC consumption and advised me, and my executive head advised me that legal must not be a hindrance. Rather put conditions precedent and recommend that the transaction proceed. I duly complied. How would you regard that as effective communication and correspondence to give you sound advice if that is the feeling of your legal team as to how they had to respond?
Commissioner, again, this is a junior person that I don't necessarily interact with. They have a head and various other senior people above them. So I wouldn't know unless they come to me directly and say, I have discomfort with this and that, insofar as the deal is concerned. So I wouldn't know. I only knew about all of those when he was testifying in this commission.
But it seems to be quite a common theme of junior people being pressured by time, by decisions, don't be a hindrance, and therefore, as a means of assurance or reliance, is it questionable, given that a lot of people have come before the Commission to say they acted under duress, they put forward what was expected of them? Because implicit in this is that the decision-making relies on the team, as you've said. But if the team is not able to give its correct view or valid view, then the reliance is actually not reliable.
Well, it's hard for me to comment on that one, Commissioner, because if some of these matters are not brought to my attention, it will be, I can't smell that there is that sort of thing happening in the organization. I rely on the heads of department to manage their people accordingly and be open with them, you know, to allow them space to be free to disagree and agree with the senior, with their bosses, if I can use that. So in this instance, that has never been, you know, brought to my attention that there is this sort of thing that's happening. Only in this commission that a lot of, and I wouldn't say a lot of people, because there are many other people at the PIC. It's only a handful that came here, you know, to
but
raise those
the
issues.
handful who have come are senior. They're people who hold decision-making positions in many instances, but let's go on. You've made your point on that. One of the issues Mr. Makuti also raises is that he feels, or he stated, that there was a potential breach of the FMA and listing requirements, for instance, and I'm quoting him, forwarding the draft PLS to a potential investor before it is approved by the JSE. In doing that, Sagamatha may have breached the JSE listing requirements because a draft PLS had not been approved and cannot be relied upon, and yet it was forwarded to the PIC as a potential investor. He also states that the draft PLS, Sagamatha draft PLS was forwarded to the PIC, that Sagamatha was not listed, and the PLS states that Sagamatha was conditionally listed by the JSE, and that was not accurate. Did your legal team bring this to your attention in relation to this?
They haven't, Commissioner.
He states further in paragraph 31 that when he had finished his draft legal report, he was informed of a share purchase agreement between Dr. Matjila on behalf of the GPF and Sagamatha had already been concluded in December 2017. And that the PIC relied on the TGR attorneys. He states again that whose name appears on the agreement actually acted for Sagamatha and not the PIC, and quote, we still do not know if the document was reviewed by external legal counsel, as is normally the process before an agreement was signed. Do you know whether any of those processes were followed by the PIC as per the agreed process within the PIC?
Commissioner, as far as I know, that the document was prepared by TGR, as he says, and given to all shareholders to approve, including the PIC. So in my view, it never required the internal process, because it was simple and straightforward, that we are making a commitment that is subject to so many conditions. So it was not putting the PIC at risk at all, in my view.
So your legal team was not required to go over that?
No, Commissioner.
Would that be in keeping with PIC processes?
Well, there are instances where I do override processes when it's necessary.
Okay. And then perhaps just as a final statement, it's Mr. Nzadza, who said very specifically that one of the reasons for him coming to the Commission was to corroborate the evidence presented by Mr. Siane, and that the question of having advised you that the resolutions and conditions precedent set by a special meeting of the FIP on the 6th of December, notwithstanding all of that, you signed off on the deal on the 13th of December. But you're saying that you did not have that information?
No, I didn't.
So it's different from what he's saying here. Okay, Thank you very much. Those were the testimonies from others that I wanted some clarity on.
Mr. Commissioner, may I proceed with my questioning?
I thought you were done. In fact, my colleague is echoing the same. He thought you were done.
No, I wasn't done, and I never said I was done. This time I didn't say.
Sagamatha, is that on Sagamatha?
Yes.
Our apology.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Dr. Matjila, may I refer you to Mr. Molebatsi's statement once again? And I want to refer you specifically to paragraph 55 and paragraph 59 of that statement.
Fifty?
55. At paragraph 55, Mr. Molebatsi says the following. On the 11th January 2018, I attended a meeting of Sagamatha management at the PIC offices. The first thing that struck me was firstly that a Sekunjalo related company was looking to do an IPO so soon after AO, and secondly, that the capital raised was to facilitate, among others, the purchase of independent media. Although I was not aware of the detail around the funding of independent media, I knew that the PIC had extended a loan to that company. And at paragraph 59, he says, the exposure to a print media company that was loss-making made the Sagamatha opportunity not as attractive to me. Is it correct, as Mr. Molebatsi says at paragraph 59, that the capital raised by Sagamatha was to be used to, among others, purchase independent media?
I think, Commissioner, we thought we have dealt with that because we own independent media, and there were processes that said, or approval that said, those two must be separated, and there are agreements around the cash settlement of independent news media and not exchange of shares. And most importantly, the schedule of payment has been defined. So I'm not sure what the issue is here.
The issue will become clear afterwards.
You may carry on. Let's get to the issue.
Okay. The evidence before this commission is that part of the capital raised by Sagamatha was going to be used to pay for the purchase of independent media. Now, Mr. Ndaza testified before this commission that Sagamatha was insolvent, and that if part of the capital raised by Sagamatha was to be used to purchase independent media, then it would not have been possible for Sagamatha to list. Do you have a comment on that?
Commissioner, I think the IC's decision was clear to say that those two must be separated. It even went to an extent of saying that putting conditions around the utilization of the monies, that it can't pay dividends and it can't be used to settle independent news media through the PIC, for the PIC, because then the PIC will be paying for its own exit. That was clear, I think.
And then,
Just a follow-up. So when you say separated, you mean that the PIC wanted its loans and everything to be paid in cash or
Yes.
whatever, and then it will then decide whether it wants to subscribe to Sagamatha's IPOs and all the, or using cash, but it didn't want to translate its loans and claims into shares in Sagamatha. Is that what you're saying when you
That's
say-
correct, and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
the utilization of the proceeds of the listing as well. It was clear that they can't be used to buy independent media, otherwise
Exactly.
PIC will be.
Sort of
Funding
it's a
it,
tripping.
exactly,
The
exactly.
PIC is dishing out shares and then there's cash and then that cash is used to,
Absolutely,
to
and my
repay the
understanding, that's why the independent news media was not part of the PLS, if my memory serves me well.
later or.
The
was it
PLS,
later
final
or
PLS
The
was
final
not-
one, yeah.
Yes, it was removed from there because of that.
on the issue of Sagamatha issuing additional shares to the PIC at R1 per share, Mr. Ndaza testified that if that had been done, the PIC would have had to pay more than 300 million rand. Do you have a comment on that?
Commissioner, that was not done. I think I would love to stick to the real things that happened. The deal didn't go through. The call option was not possible, as we said. We've explained that the PLS needed to be changed. So it becomes an academic discussion, in my view.
Okay. Do you have any comment on the allegation by Mr. Ndaza that according to the draft pre-listing statement of Sagamatha, Sagamatha was technically insolvent?
I don't have a comment on that. I will have to look at what he meant by insolvent, Commissioner.
Then,
Wait, insolvent or loss-making, because you might have these companies that are IT companies that don't making profits.
my
Because
recollection is,
insolvent means something completely different. It means the company doesn't have to exist.
There's no way that the JSC can allow a company
An
that's
insolvent, yes.
company to list and issue a pre-listing
Yeah,
statement.
definitely, yeah. I think more like unprofitable, because these companies can go on for a long time without making profits, these technology companies.
Mr. Commissioner, if I recall properly, Mr. Ndaza used the word insolvent.
Insolvent, is it? Okay. All right, we can double check that today. Yeah.
Dr. Matjila,
He may have used the word insolvent, but the question is, was he correct in saying that it was insolvent? That's the issue, and I think Dr. Matjila says the JSE would not have allowed it to list if it was insolvent.
yes. Ms. Bongana Matebula testified before this commission that a day before the investment committee was to sit to consider the Sagamatha transaction, you forwarded some letters from political formations to her and asked her to give them to the members of the investment committee. Was she correct?
Yes, she was correct, Commissioner.
And you testified before this commission that you protected the PIC through investment processes. Is it part of the investment processes of the PIC that when political formations support a transaction, they can forward their letters to the CEO of the PIC, and then the CEO of the PIC can then forward those letters to the company secretary and ask them to forward them to the members of the investment committee?
Commissioner, people write to the PIC, there's correspondence all the time. If it's addressed to the investment committee, we'll pass it on to them. to look at.
But my recollection is that those letters were not addressed to the members of the investment committee.
I think we would have passed it on to them for information. I don't think it's got anything to do with an investment process of the PIC. It's someone writing to say we expressed support of this transaction, and that's it. The PIC will do its own work and analysis and take judgment independent of that.
Mr. Commissioner, I'm done on Saga matters, but there are questions that I forgot to ask on the agreement relating to the exit from independent media. With your leave, may I pose those questions?
That's TD 60.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes.
Dr. Matjila, you testified yesterday that you had signed Annexure DD 60 to your statement.
Yeah, I said as far as I can recall, that was an agreement that was supposed to be signed to give effect to the payment, schedule of payment as per PIC, IC decision.
Do you know if someone signed on behalf of the Sekunjalo group?
I don't know what happened to that agreement, Commissioner. It was there, and I left before it was given effect.
But if no one had signed on behalf of Sekunjalo group, there could not have been an agreement.
Agree with that if it was not countersigned by the other party.
Commissioner, I don't know what happened because
No, you know that if it wasn't signed on behalf of the other side, it would not have been an agreement.
Yeah, that's correct, Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, may you just place it on record that we will also check whether the agreement was signed at all on behalf of any of the parties.
That's fine, although Dr. Matjila yesterday testified that he did sign. I think
yes, he did say
he
did say that.
We have blank copies, but he said yesterday he remembers signing that agreement.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. Dr. Matjila, may I refer you to Dr. Survé's statement that I gave to you this morning? And may I refer you to paragraphs 44 and 45 of that statement? You said the following at paragraph 44. In the latter part of 2018, Sekunjalo put in a firm offer to the PIC. This meant that Sekunjalo would take on the exposure of the PIC over and above its current support of the operating cash flow needs of the business. Sekunjalo therefore went from a minimal risk position to assuming significant risk in an endeavor to help the government employees pension fund and the PIC. Despite the PIC having agreed to the above, Sekunjalo has received no formal communication from the PIC since the offer, despite repeated requests to the PIC. This was the position until last week when it was verbally communicated to Sekunjalo that the PIC had rejected the offer. It seems from paragraph 45 that no agreement was entered into. Do you have any comment on that?
Commissioner, it's possible because I had left by then, I believe. And in my statement, I do say that I had left. I don't know what happened to the proposals.
Now, that takes me back to the statement that I made earlier, that if no one had signed on behalf of the Sekunjalo group, then there was no agreement.
I assume so, Commissioner.
Can you just remind us, Dr. Matjila, when did you leave again?
In the 23rd of November, 2018. Yes, Commissioner.
I have no further questions, Mr. Commissioner.
The beginning of that paragraph 44 says in the latter part of 2018, you would have been gone by then.
Yes, because it says the
Must be
latter.
because it-
Yes, there has been a proposal, as you say. Commissioner?
Whatever is said here, in the latter part of 2018, Sekunjalo put a firm offer to the PIC. You know anything about that offer that was put to the PIC?
Yes, this is the offer that was now, after approval by the investment committee, was reduced into that agreement that we discussed.
So if you know, you hadn't left at that stage when that offer was put to the PIC.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct. I think that's more accurate. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I have no further questions, Mr. Commissioner.
All right, we may carry on.
Dr. Matjila's just requested a break of 10 minutes, Commissioners.
All right, let's take a break for 10 minutes.
We're indebted.
Yes.
Commissioners, thank you for the break. We're now going to deal with the AO Technology Solutions transaction. So we are at page 147, paragraph 415.
Thank you, Commissioner. AO Technology Solutions, AO. The opportunity to invest in AO was introduced to me by the chairman of Sekunjalo Group, Dr. Iqbal Survé. This would have been around October 2017. I saw the AO proposal as very strategic for the PIC as it gave the PIC exposure to the growing ICT, information, communication and technology sector, which as part of development is part of the developmental investments. Furthermore, the fact that it was black-owned would position it strongly to pursue opportunities to enhance BE credentials of its customers. This asset fitted the GPF mandate as a long-term investor, giving it the exposure to the right technology assets and thus enhancing the sustainability of the portfolio. In paragraphs 20 to 22 of his statement to this commission, Mr. Mlebati gives an elaborate rationale for the investment with which I agree.
Dr. Matjila, if I can stop you there, you say that this asset gave the PIC exposure to the growing ICT sector, which was part of the developmental investments. Can I refer you to Annexure DD 11, page 268. We've dealt with this annexure before some days ago in your evidence. Page 268, Annexure DD 11. Thank you, Doctor. Will you just explain to us briefly again what is going on with this particular annexure?
Commissioner, this slide simply shows the thematic mega trends linked to the PIC sectorial research. In other words, the focus of sectors that are going to be driving economic growth in the long term, of which ICT is. These are developmental investments sectors. I think we spoke about them quite at length earlier in my statement. Involves agro-processing, agriculture, mining beneficiation, energy, all those sectors with huge social impact, including ICT. And IO technology will be falling under thematic meta trend in tech empowerment, empowered individuals and tech empowered organizations. And it will be falling under the ICT developmental investment in this chart here. That's its relevance.
Thank you. Continue with your statement, please.
Just some clarification, Dr. Matjila. IT groups, I think there's a black group called Adapt IT. It's a listed B group in the tech sector. Did the PIC, ever think about maybe backing that kind of a company which is listed? It has been doing well, and maybe it could want some growth. I do not know what their plans were, but when you compare them to IO, they're a listed company, they've been doing well.
I would have thought that if there's any capital raise, they would be in a stronger position if they approached PIC with a proposal around that. So that would be the nature of PIC's support. But nothing stops PIC again from supporting it through other investments, other instruments. It can even be growth and all that. Debt, as long as there's a strong value proposition, which is going to drive growth and returns eventually. So I would assume that if they are in a strong position they should approach the PIC for expansion and growth.
I agree, although risk is another element, you know, and I agree with, I generally agree, but it might, in terms of risk, it would be better to back a company which exists than a new company in general.
It depends. I mean, a new company would be good as well because it becomes a pioneer, especially if they've got a strong, differentiated strategy, you know, that is, you know, can be well executed by the team. It's a big bet that you play there, you know. So, again, I mean, if we talk about IO, you look at what it is. What is IO about? It's almost like an investment holding company that's supposed to be chasing opportunities in the tech sector. So you basically award capital for someone to deploy you on your behalf in an effective way, versus a company that's probably narrowed in its focus, and you provide them with cash to expand their activities, you know, in a particular field. So there's a difference between investment holding company in an IT sector and an IT company that's actually doing the job. Yeah.
So you are saying that kind of company sort of could be smaller than what IO was trying to do, and maybe the different business strategies and all that?
That's correct.
IO versus
we'll have to understand
IT.
what space they are playing in and what they are pursuing. So yeah, I think if they approach the PIC with a good value proposition, they can be assisted there, because they are in the right space. Yeah.
We're not sure whether they approach the PIC or not. Maybe
sure.
they have the capital they need and all that. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, all right.
And I'd assume that once, I haven't checked their market cap where it is, you may find that they are in the main board and the PIC is already having an exposure that is defined or dictated to by the mandate.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. All right, okay. Thanks.
So it's fine. In my position as a CEO, I was not involved with the analysis of the investment potential of the opportunities presented to the PIC in transaction processing. I therefore requested Mr. Madavo, as the executive head of listed investment, to look into the opportunity and assess its investment potential. He led the IO investment process from the PIC side. I understand there was an exchange of information between AEEI corporate finance team and the PIC in the build-up towards the listing, including the formal meeting on the 16th of November, 2017. I'm aware that the draft pre-listing statement, PLS, was sent to the PIC around the 24th of November, and this fact is confirmed in paragraph 32 of Mr. Victor Siani's statement to this commission. My understanding was that the draft PLS was shared with the PIC even before it was finalized to allow the PIC begin its internal investment processes. The postponement of PMC meetings scheduled for the 6th and 13th December 2017 added to the pressure of meeting the deadline for the subscription, which was by the 17 hours on 15th of December 2017. Relevant persons were either traveling or on leave, and no quorum could be formed at those meetings.
Dr. Matjila, if I can just stop you there. The PMC meeting is scheduled for 6th and 13th December 2017. Do you know, in relation to the AO transaction, what those meetings would ideally have been looking at?
They would be looking at the pre-due diligence approval. In other words, testing for appetite at that point.
Thank you.
However, the teams work hard to ensure that the analysis was done as per PIC investment processes. This is evidenced by the submissions and documents prepared and completed by the various teams and committees. By the 14th and 15th of December, due diligence exercises had been compiled, reviewed, recommended, and approval for submission to PMC, and signed by the relevant persons responsible for those functions. The outcome of the due diligence process was the conclusion that IO was an appropriate and attractive investment for the PIC. Mr. M. Lebati, in his statement to this commission, has outlined the investment process for initial public offerings. The key information document in the IPO process is the pre-listing statement that the company offering the shares for subscription issues as per JSE regulations. The JSE also, in their statement to this commission, highlighted the importance of the PLS to potential investors. A JSE-approved PLS contains sufficient and proper, credible, and verified information that can be used by any potential investor anywhere in the world to make an investment decision on the company to be listed. It has to be finally approved by the JSE. That is the pre-listing statement, and supported by JSE-approved corporate sponsor, legal advisor, technical advisor, and an accountant, all of whom must be independent and reputable in their respective professions. The draft IOPLS is attached and marked DD 62. For IPOs, a considerable portion of the due diligence is on valuation to ascertain the attractiveness of the listing price as per PLS and the proposals, the prospect of value creation over time. This process is performed by the deal team. In addition, the PIC, in terms of its investment processes, will do risk, legal, and ESG analysis to identify any risk and propose the way forward. This process is done in-house, as the PLS will typically contain most of, if not all, information required to carry out this analysis. These various risks were dealt with in the IOT due diligence reports and appraisal reports. It is therefore no surprise that the PIC investment process for an IPO can be performed in a much shorter period of time than for another type of investment, because all information necessary for the P1 stage, which is the stage of pre-due diligence, and the due diligence reports and recommendations to PMC is already contained in the PLS and verified by external reputable professionals. This fact was confirmed by the JSE in their presentation to this commission, as well as the transcript of same. Here is the extract from the JSE presentation. This was Mr. Andres Fesser. He said, certainly, Mr. Commissioner, the aim of the disclosure is first and foremost to allow the JSE to make an informed assessment based on the facts presented as to whether the company in fact meets the basic requirement, and secondly, and more importantly, to allow investors to make an informed assessment on a couple of fronts. Firstly, that they fully understand the nature of the business of the applicant, that they have all and full disclosure of all relevant facts and information so that they can make an informed decision as to whether they wish to participate in the listing of the company, either prior to listing or post-listing in the secondary market. And thirdly, to formulate their views based on the disclosure where they are prepared to pay the price at which the securities are being offered, either in the initial offering through a private placement or public offer, or in the secondary market when the shares are purchased on the JSE. So that disclosure is of paramount importance, and it is a principle that is applicable to all capital markets throughout the world, that investors are provided with full information to allow them to make informed decisions. So, Commissioner, this is the importance of the PLS. It's supposed to have these qualities to allow investors to make informed decisions. It is very important to highlight that PMC1 and PMC2 that have been talked about in this commission are neither special meetings nor separate meetings to deal with specific transactions, but rather refer to a stage at which a transaction is at in the investment process. PMC1 referred to a stage in the transaction that is before due diligence. The PMC1 stage tests for mandate fit and therefore investment appetite. A transaction that passes this stage potentially moves to the DD stage, subject to the consideration of costs to the PIC in appointing external service providers to assist in the due diligence process. If no external service providers need to be appointed to assist with the conduct of due diligence, there is then no cost to the PIC in conducting due diligence, and approval for the transaction to move on to the due diligence stage is axiomatic. If, however, the external service providers are necessary to be appointed to conduct due diligence process, the appointment of which would then obviously involve cost to the PIC, a call must be made as to whether such costs are warranted to be incurred given the investment potential of the transaction. That's where PMC1 becomes necessary. Once the DD is completed, the transaction moves to PMC2 stage, which is a stage where the transaction is either approved by PMC or is recommended to the higher committee as per delegation of authority. I must stress that the same PMC meeting looks at and discusses all transactions. That is, both those that are PMC1 and PMC stages are discussed in the same meeting, not separate meeting. There is no separate meetings for PMC1 stage transactions and another separate meeting for PMC stage transactions.
Does this mean it's the same people will populate the PMC2 as they did PMC1?
Yes, most of the time they will be the same. Let me use offices because there are instances where people are on leave but they have someone acting on their behalf. So there are certain positions that are supposed to be in those meetings as members of the committee.
There's another quick question there. In terms of the quorum, what are the quorum rules there? Just briefly, the PMC quorums.
I don't have the terms of reference with me, but they specify the quorum requirements. One of which is that an executive has to be in that meeting. One executive must be present in that meeting for the committee to proceed. But we can check that. Yeah. I think key departments that needs to be there will be the investment team, represented by equities, of course, or even fixed income if there is an instrument in fixed income that is being looked at, risk and ESG, and then legal. Those four. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
We just also on clarity on this, because this is a bit confusing to me, and I might not have understood properly before. I thought that PMC1 has a distinct role and PMC2 has a distinct role. Does not one look at whether there's appetite, whether it fits the mandate, whether there's due diligence required and so on, which is PMC1, and then a decision to say, let's do that. And then PMC2 looks at whether the investment assesses the due diligence. PMC1 does, you get the authorization for the due diligence, and PMC2 assesses the due diligence.
Commissioner, there's technically no PMC1 and PMC2. There's only one portfolio management committee. But in that meeting, there will be transactions at different stages. Some needing pre-due diligence, which it has been termed PMC1. So all those that are needing pre-due diligence and those that are in due diligence stage, either at approval stage or recommendation to the next committee. So it's one meeting that looks at transactions, which will be at different stages of execution, in other words.
Then why do you call it PMC1 and PMC2?
Well,
if it's one meeting that just has different stages of different transactions that's presented before it, and then I don't understand what the issue was around not having gone through PMC1, and that has occurred on a number of transactions. that the due diligence wasn't approved or that PMC1 didn't do that. If you're saying it's just one meeting with different stages of transactions, is that?
That's correct.
That's all it is?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to explain to the commission here, because I realize that there seems to be a misunderstanding that, you know, there are two committees meeting at different times with different people assessing transaction in that way. It's the same committee that looks at different transaction at different stages.
But is it in the same meeting at the same time? There's not a separate, so we don't
absolutely.
have a due diligence looked at here and it's going to come to another meeting, which is the same people, which would then look at the due diligence. So a decision to do due diligence and then look at a due diligence.
Absolutely. And
It's
it will
the
be
same meeting, the
yeah.
same people. So
And
why would you call it PMC1 that needs to progress to PMC2?
that's what we're trying to correct, because this whole standard operating procedures that was adopted here is from unlisted investments. So it's almost like fitting in an unlisted investment standard operating procedures in a listed environment, which has become problematic. But I was happy with that. We can work around that because my understanding is that procedures within the organizations are my responsibility to design things that make sure that, you know, transactions are processed in a particular way, you know. So
There's no terms of reference for a PMC1 or terms of reference for a PMC2?
no.
Is there terms of reference for PMC at all?
Overall PMC will have one terms of reference. And listed will have their own, unlisted will have their own terms of reference. But they are more or less similar.
So if we are talking about PMC 1 and 2, we are talking of the same, let's say the same people sitting on the same day and dealing with whether or not there should be due diligence.
Yes, in a particular transaction.
In a particular transaction.
Yes.
And that same meeting can, at that same sitting, deal with what is known as PMC 2 on
Absolutely.
its agenda.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, would it be right to say, to talk about PMC 1 and 2 is a bit of a misnomer in some sense, because it's transactions that are at PM1, PM2 stages. You could even say the ones that are approved could be PMC 3 even, you know.
Yeah.
Yes, isn't it that it's the transaction at the stage that is at?
Absolutely, that's what it is.
Yes,
That's
you
what
know,
it is.
so when something is at PM2, it means like it's going to DD stage and something like that.
Yeah.
Technically, you can have PMC 3 for a transaction,
If
or
that,
4, PMC 4.
maybe it's disbursement, I don't know.
So we shouldn't then confidently say it's a transaction stage.
That's critical, it's a transaction stage,
Yes, yes.
you know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, if we are confused by PMC 1 and 2, I don't know why we should get to 3 and 4.
We prefer to call them PMC and, you know, let them be stages of transaction, pre-DD or DD, and, you know, it's better. It's better that way.
Just another question which I've tried to ask, but I'm not sure I've got the answer. Typically, in a PMC meeting, so sort of how many transactions would be there? I mean, roughly, in a typical PMC? Or even to ask it differently, how many transactions in unlisted does the PIC see broadly, and how many are approved percentage-wise?
Yeah.
I've asked the question, and I just want rough figures
Okay.
for now.
I would say, on average, in a PMC unlisted, which at times will last for almost a day, we could process close to 5 transactions or so.
At various stages.
At various
5 transactions
at various stages, yeah,
yes.
at various stages.
Yeah.
So some in pre-due diligence, some in post-due diligence. But there will be instances where we do slightly more, you know. A lot of work, a lot of energy is spent on those that are in DD stage that are waiting for approval because we have to interrogate more, slightly more energy is directed towards that. The pre-DD stage, it's normally very quick because the team would have done a lot of work in terms of mandate feed, potential job creation, and where it's located in a bigger portfolio. And therefore it's normally a lot faster, but a lot of energy is then on the post-DD stage where approval is sought. And in the listed space, it will really depend. There are times where it's lesser because there are no IPOs or there are no rights issues. It's very unpredictable there.
How many times does the PMC unlisted meet? Is it once a week? Is it once in 2 weeks?
It's almost once a week, but there will be instances where one meeting then, is adjourned and it sits over several days because of the volume of transactions that are there. And these transactions, by the way, are brought by different teams. You may have in the developmental investment team, the team that's dealing with infrastructure, social infrastructure, bringing a transaction, another one in economic, another one in manufacturing, priority sectors. So you have all of that, But we had put limits at some stage, say we can't process more than, I can't remember what the number was, but there was a stage where we said, let's not process more than this number because it doesn't allow us thorough engagement on issues properly,
So then it's like 5 transactions per week, roughly, times what, 50 weeks? Well, then we're talking, what, 250 transactions per annum?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you have approvals on all of them. You may find that there are lots of things, issues and so on. The thing gets sent backwards and forward, and you can see that in the overall approvals at the end of the financial year. In terms of size, you find that in the end we've approved about 20 billion or 15 billion or 5 billion in some instances, So yes. There will be quite a bit of transaction that are looked at, but this sifting process will select what we could consider the best.
Yeah. So are you saying then we're looking at what, 200 transactions that you normally see, 250 maybe? And then what? And then you approve what, 5-10% of those? 25 transactions, 30 transactions per annum?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, probably 30 transactions make sense.
Around what,
number,
250, 200?
Out of quite a number. I don't have the figure.
You can't remember the number. Okay. All right. Okay. At least.
But I think that the PIC team can provide the numbers. And this is again the issue that the commissioner raised earlier on to say, the IT system that allows you to track these sorts of things. Oh my gosh. Apologies. I keep forgetting this. Apologies, Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, if I may, on the same score of PMC settings and stage 1 and 2, can a transaction progress from 1 to 2 in the same sitting, a single transaction?
That will be a special case, and the key step is that the pre-due diligence stage would have been approved on the basis that there's no money spent. In other words, PIC has all the information that it requires and resources internally to be able to process that. All that is spent is PIC time and effort to be able to prepare that. But we would know upfront, and I get told, and the executive head will know that there is a transaction that we agree that it can be done. The due diligence can start because information is there. And at that meeting, we will then, agree that we waive the requirement of pre-due diligence because it has been done, the information was there, and then it can get into the DD stage.
All right, so the waiver is an important part.
Yes.
Because there's in the process a stage 1 and a stage 2.
Yes, it's implied in that.
Thank you.
Can I proceed?
Mr. Commissioner, we're going to proceed now on to the next paragraph. I don't know whether you wish us to proceed or take the lunch and adjournment perhaps 2 or 3 minutes early. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Just another question before we just go, just to clarify something here. Does it happen that a transaction comes with a due diligence have been done and all the transaction documents are done and the PIC doesn't need to do much? It can just read those documents?
We avoid that kind of situation because then we rely too much on someone else's work, you know. The PIC, I mean, that's how we looked at it, and we would rather still subject it to internal processes, even appoint somebody, you know, a service provider to review, and that becomes a limited scope, in other words, to advise whether the quality of information that's in front of the PIC is the one that can be relied on and used.
No, thanks. Yeah. I get it.
And there are instances where we actually, you know, even tell individuals to go and do the due diligence on our behalf, but then we define the scope as well as potential service providers, you know, for their account most of the time when that happens. Yeah.
Can I suggest we push on until 1:15?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Please carry on with paragraph 424.
There are instances where there are deviations from PMC one stage investment process, either on approval by the CEO in terms of item 3.4 of the delegated authority, listed investment attached as DD 14.1, I think, or by later ratification by the IC or PMC, depending on the type of the investment.
Dr. Matjila, if I can just stop you there, let's just deal with item 3.4 of the delegation of authority for listed investments. That's at page 296 of the annexures bundle. You have it?
Yes, I do.
If we have a look at that item, it is 3.4. It says deviation from AUM. What does AUM mean?
Assets under management.
Procurement policy and guidelines.
Yes.
Okay, it provides for the CEO to give final approval for the deviation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But then there must be an executive head or general managers which are listed there as initiators. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it appears that the CFO must agree beforehand.
That's correct.
So that's one potential way.
Yes.
Thank you. And the other potential way that you've said is a later ratification.
Yes, by the committee.
Would you explain to us about that?
So it's allowed that the committee can ratify the decisions in retrospect because they have authority to do so.
And have they done so before?
Yes, there has been.
Please carry on with your statement.
Thank you. The latter situation occurred, for example, in the Edcon transaction, an unlisted investment referred to in paragraph 610.3 of Ms. Moore's statement to the Commission, which was ratified by the IC and also occurred in the African Rainbow Capital Investment Limited IPO, these are listed investments, in which the PMC ratified the deviation from the PMC one stage by granting approval to proceed to due diligence process. The resolution of the PMC meeting of 11 August is attached and marked DD 63. This type of deviation will occur where the information for the initial investment analysis of the transaction and therefore the mandate feed, that PMC1, is already available, and additionally, there is no cost to the PIC in the appointment of external service providers to assist with the conduct of the DD. A transaction of this sort can therefore immediately go into due diligence process. A deviation from PMC1 is very common for IPOs, initial public offerings, as these are always accompanied by JSE-approved PLS, because the information necessary for PMC1 is already included in the PLS, and there is no cost to the PIC in the appointment of external service providers to assist with the compilation of the due diligence, as the information for the due diligence is already contained and verified by reputable external professionals in the JSE-approved PLS.
Dr. Matjila, I want to stop you there, and you referred to the ARC, the African Rainbow Capital IPO, where, as an example of where this happened, can I refer you to page 559 of the annexures, annexure DD 63.
Okay. We are there. Thank you.
So, Dr. Matjila, this is a round-robin resolution of the PMC for listed investments, is that correct?
That's correct.
It seems to involve a participation in an IPO of up to 30% in ARC and African Rainbow Capital Investments, is that right?
That's correct.
And it's resolved that the committee approves that the transaction team, that's the deal team, is that correct?
That's correct.
Can proceed with the due diligence for African Rainbow Capital Investments ahead of the listing on the JSE.
That's correct, Commissioner.
Was there a PMC 1 stage for African Rainbow Capital Investments?
Not as far as I can remember. This is what was regularizing the PMC 1 process.
And
in this instance.
Why would there not have been a PMC 1 stage for this transaction?
Because all the information was available on the PLS to conduct the due diligence, Commissioner.
Sorry, can I just get a point of clarity there, Dr. Matjila, because I don't think anyone's disputing the approach with, as you have put in paragraph 425, this is a deviation from PMC 1, as these are always accompanied by a JSE-approved PLS. The critical question there is the JSE-approved PLS. As far as I understand what you've said about the IO, is that this, if you, and I know it's slightly ahead, this was a draft PLS.
Yes, it was
and therefore it is not approved by the JSE. It has not gone through that scrutiny when you looked at the due diligence of IO. So the references to African Rainbow, etc., are based on an approved JSE PLS.
But we believe that the information in all cases is normally accurate.
Okay,
so the end.
I'm just clarifying that this was an approved PLS, and this. But when we're coming now to 426, you refer to the IO as a draft PLS, which must be different from an approved JSE document by your own consideration of its standing.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
so we'll
correct.
come to that. I just wanted
Sure.
clarity that we're talking here about an approved PLS.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to get some, to clarify something here. Dr. Yes, Matjila, when you get a PLS, what do the analysts do? Do they only do the valuation, or do they do any other things?
I think
Because I know in
yeah.
other asset managers, they actually just look at the valuation and the financial statements, but because technically there's not much you can do. You can't visit the company to do a DD, because it's been done already.
Yeah, that's correct.
But what does the PIC do, the analysts and the portfolio managers?
Commissioner, I expect to do exactly what you've described, because information is there, and it cuts across the ESG team as well. We have all the directors and be able to analyze, the ESG issues in the PLS or in the transaction from this information. So will risk, because all that information has been verified and approved by reputable JSE approved organizations. So they expect it to be of the right quality to be used by investors. So that's normally what happens. In the case of IO and them, this to and fro discussions was because it's a draft. They needed to confirm certain things that they are in place, so that by the time the final comes, there's hopefully not much difference. So then the transaction can be done in that way.
We shall come to it, but I just wanted to check what would be the difference between approved PLS versus a draft one, but I'm sure we'll come to it at some point. Yeah, okay.
We're fine.
Continue. Yeah, can continue.
Paragraph 426, Commissioner. Thus, in the case of IO listing, the PIC had received a draft PLS following the signing of a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, with AEI Corporate Finance on the 24th of November 2017. There was therefore no necessity for a PMC1 process, and there was no cost to the PIC in respect of the due diligence, as well as the necessary information was already contained in the draft PLS. This allowed the team, the PIC, to immediately start with the draft due diligence, the intention being that by the time the JSE approved PLS was received, the PIC would have already done the bulk of the work for due diligence, which would facilitate meeting the listing deadline, which was 17 hours on the 15th of December 2017. Accordingly, once the final, that is JSE approved PLS for the IO listing was received, which occurred, I think the date is wrong there, I think it's the 15th, the 14th actually, and part of which was the private placement application form. All that would have remained to be done was to reconcile the information contained therein with that of the various reports and the appraisal reports, to the extent necessary, amend those to accommodate the contents of the final PLS. In the IO transaction, the final PLS did not contain any differences from the draft PLS, except for date changes, of course, because then the date will have changed. The timetable for listing would have changed. And therefore, the information upon the strength of which the investment was made was the information contained in the final PLS. A copy of the final PLS is attached and marked DD 64. The PMC meeting scheduled for the 6th of December was cancelled due to quorum challenges. This was the meeting intended to give approval for the immediate undertaking of due diligence for the IO transaction. However, for the reasons said above, set out above, the approval for the transaction to enter into due diligence would have been foregone conclusion. Given the looming subscription deadline, it would have been unnecessarily dilatory to insist upon this administrative decision being made before the real meat of the transaction, being the due diligence process, could start. There was therefore no reason that the processing of the out transaction could not immediately start with the due diligence process, and there could be no difficulty with a request to department involved in this function to begin their respective tasks in this regard, even before formal PMC approval had been given. In fact, it is to be commended that the due diligence, the conduct of the due diligence began without this approval, as there is no doubt that the reports and the appraisal necessary for the subscription would not have been completed in time if it had first been obtained. Similarly, the meeting of the 13th of December 2017, which was to formalize approval for the due diligence process, also did not materialize due to quorum challenges. Mr. Mulibati, the IO deal team leader as Fidelis was overseas, then approached me to discuss the subscription, considering the difficulties we had in convening meetings at that time. As a result of our conversation on the 13th of December, I telephoned Matseko Taukubong, the ESG team, Candice Abrahams, risk team, and Winifred Setsedi legal team to ascertain from them if their reports have been concluded, and if so, whether their reports recommended the conclusion of the transaction. I was assured by each that although the appraisal report and the reports from the individual department had not been prepared and printed, all the reports and the appraisals have been concluded and that they recommended the conclusion of the deal. Their respective confirmation were subsequently borne out by the content of the appraisal report and annexures, a copy of which is attached and marked DD65, which among others concluded that, I quote, at a forward PE of 16 times on management's earning estimates, the IO transaction appears to be reasonably attractive, catalytic investment to stimulate significant transformation in the ICT sector. And its recommendation that it is recommended that the Portfolio Management Committee, PMC listed, approves approximately 4.3 billion share purchase of 29% of IO at 43 rands per share in IO's private placement. This conclusion and recommendation was steadfastly repeated and confirmed by the time the PIC appeared before SCOPA in November 2018 in respect of the IO transaction. I must address the allegations that I put pressure on my colleagues to do the transaction. Although there was pressure to meet the listing deadline, I have not put any pressure on anyone to make specific recommendations, including the valuation to ensure that the deal worked.
Can we stop there and take the adjournment?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you. I think it's a convenient time to take. I think it's convenient to take it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 2:15. We'll adjourn until 2:15.